Welcome back to the series on building this workbench. And yes, it's been a while since the last installment. Doesn't really matter why, I can just say that I've been busy, and probably I've been putting it off. Because I'm still a little insecure about this. These processes and these tools and this set of plans is new to a carpenter, to a concrete man, to a blacksmith, to a welder, to a logger. It's a little different, but it's fun. And Kenny's looking over my shoulder. He's got my back. And so, ready or not, here we go. All right, I've started cutting the middles out of a lot of these. In fact, every one of these whiteboards I'm crippling. I'm cutting down the middle and maybe cutting some defect out. Like that's a 17-inch wide board, but it's got this check. Can't use it. So I'm going to throw away a couple inches out of there, throw away 1.5 inches of this ambrosia, the wormholes. This big, beautiful thing has really only got a 5-inch board on this side and a 7-inch board on that side, but we're learning how to joint panels together, and it's good practice. And I mean, it is what it is. I've got to save the best boards, the very best boards for my wife's kitchen. But in the meantime, there's a lot of good material here, so we'll just, you know, be a little selective. Well, it's taken 3 hours to sort of break these down, cut around the defect, and put them back together so that they present the right face and the right panels. So the trick is, I'm trying to figure out some sort of a way to be able to just plane these and then register them back together, and what it is taking me this long to figure out. I think I've got it. Kenny thinks maybe I've got it. Well, you got to look at me wrestling the boards around and cutting the lengths and ripping out the defect and planing. Took about 5 hours. And I kept on it pretty good. I mean, the camera didn't slow me down much. Ken didn't last through the whole process. Who can blame him for that? We've got a pretty nice stack. We've got 8 panels represented here with 4 separate pieces per each. Some of them are book match out of the original boards, but a lot of them aren't. The thing that's helping me here is there are 3 interior panels that are floors, shelves, and dividers that nobody's going to see. So the pieces that just couldn't be really anywhere near perfect can be hidden inside the whole bench. So the pages that show this, what you need for these panels, page 25 is sort of a breakdown of drawers and blocking and drawer runners, but there's a rendering right there showing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exterior panels, an interior panel for 6, 7 for the floor, and then a few pages later on page 28 you get another look at it, and it shows the shelf in the middle. And then the last thing to show you on these plans before I get back to work is that the dimensions on these panels happen mostly on page 31, lines 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And then you turn the page, and the mid panel spills over onto line 21. A big part of the challenge on this project is going to be to keep track, to catalog and remember what the individual pieces have been milled and cut and notched and panelized for. It's not just that the size has to be right, but that there are lefts and rights and mid pieces and balanced against the quality of the wood and the appearance. So I'll try to show you as many ways as I figure out to do it, and I will try to show you as many ways as I figure out to mess it up. I think this is elementary for those of you who are woodworkers, and it's certainly something that I'm aware of, but I'm learning it in a more, I'm not as prone to forget it after I've done this for a few hours. I've not done this much in my life, but you got to pay attention to how the grain's oriented when you start it into that jointer. Because I don't know if you can see this, but I jointed this little spot right here from this direction with the knives whirling this way, and sure enough, major tear out, enough that it fouls up the line itself. So I need to pay more attention to the grain that is scalloping in and out at the edge, because it'll lift so easy. And I need to give it the benefit of the orientation of the grain, I think. But more than anything, I've just got to slow my act down here a little bit and stop thinking of this as a sawmill operation and stop start thinking of it more as a, I don't know, what, toothbrushing operation, where you're paying attention and moving as slowly as you need to. Well, with the pieces cut out for the panels and for the framework, I am ready to biscuit joint and glue and clamp these panels into place. Verify the layout, verify that there's plenty of length to cut off the remaining defects to get the best possible face to the outside of the world. Remember, even in furniture work, I think, if it looks good, it is good. These biscuit joiners are awesome. I say that as if I know anything about them. I bet I haven't put in 150 biscuits in my life, and 100 of those have been with Ken looking over my shoulder. So I'm missing him right now, but I think I'm doing all right. I've got the centers of the marks carefully registered, and I'm paying attention to that, and the spacing is pretty close. So we're going to go ahead as if we knew, and probably this time next week I'm going to know a lot more about whether or not I got it right. So Ken tells me that these biscuit joints don't contribute much strength, that the glue joint itself is as strong as the wood fiber or stronger, but what these do is facilitate alignment so that when you clamp these things together, the sides are pretty close to flush. So I'm just going to dry fit to make sure that everything lines up and that everything squeezes up tight, and then once it's dry fit, we'll start slinging glue pretty much everywhere, I think. All right, at dry fit, everything squeezes up, the joints disappear, so I'm going to loosen it up and start squirting on the tight bond. So Kenny has admonished me a couple of times, and I'm beginning to get the picture that these things don't have to be terribly tight. Now, I've wiped the glue off of the surface of this, but his point is that if you make it too tight, it squeezes out all the glue, and the glue is what is actually doing the work. So you just want it tight enough, if I'm understanding, have full contact and not so tight that you get rid of what it is you're counting on. Got a little bit of lippage right there. We've realigned the marks that we put in place for the biscuit joint as an indication of sort of referencing where it needs to go, and I think that we're on the right track. I'm going to turn it over, wipe some of the glue off the other side, and rack up another set. So this set of boards is for the shelf. Actually, yeah, the shelf behind the door, inside. Nobody's going to see it, and I'll probably leave it 3/4 of an inch thick or thereabouts. So I'm going to be a little more particular about any misalignment or lippage, I think it's called. But if there is some in there, we can plane it down because, you know, 11/16 of oak is pretty darn strong on a 24-inch span. The next thing I'm going to cut out, is the drawer pieces. Those are found lines 52 through 60. I've got a couple of details in here that I've cleaned up, something that should have been included on the plans. By the time you order these, it'll all be taken care of. So you may have noticed when I was putting together those panels, I wasn't really trying for vertical grain. I wasn't trying for fleck, but I've pulled these pieces out of the stack and stood them up because they're going to be drawer faces, and they've got just, you know, really extreme and beautiful fleck pattern. Hopefully I'll be able to get all of the pieces I need for the drawer fronts out of those and use more garden variety stuff on the sides and on the back. So it took a couple hours yesterday afternoon, but I've got the pieces sorted out, ripped to width plus, cut to length plus, and the high value, the highly figured, the good looking pieces identified for the front of the drawers. Everything's planed from 15/16 down to 3/4. With the drawer front set aside at 3/4, I'm taking everything else down to 1/2 inch. Probably going to take another hour and a half. We'll see how that goes. So I've come to a moment that I've been sort of thinking of. Should I say apprehensive of? Nah, I don't think so. I think it's going to go great. But what this is the best of 3 1-inch thick boards that Harvey cut out of a piece of crotch wood. That is where the tree came up and then forked. And you can see that it was happening right here. We have one stem down here, and then you get this feather pattern, and then it goes out into 2 stems. It remained fairly flat. The other 2 boards out of this crotch waved around enough and split enough they're not going to work. But I need 18 wide and about 22 long, and I'm going to cut this 22 wide and 24 long so that I can center up and make symmetric kind of how this feather starts and how it resolves. And I'm going to overlook this little bit of checking in here because it's worth it. It's just worth it. This goes into the door on the lower left-hand side of the bench. Now Kenny had a delicious book match, highly figured vertical grain oak panel that he put together. I'm not doing that. I'm saving those book matches for my wife's kitchen. But I'm going to put this in the door on the bench. Door panel, 18 3/8 by 20 7/8. I've got about 3 inches that I can throw away in the width off of here. And I want to get down below this check enough that hopefully it won't open up. And I need one more, so, yep, that'll do that. Okay. And to take a chapter out of Cy Swan's book, faint heart never won fair maiden. You see that? That's adding 3 inches. You see that? That's adding 5 inches. I've got a faint heart, and I've already got my fair maiden. I'm building that in. Well, I worked on Friday and Saturday without Ken here, and I missed him. There were times when I thought, man, I wonder if this is the right thing to do, but I just sort of girded up my loins and jumped in, and he said that I didn't wreck anything that can't be fixed. So I guess there's comfort in that. But all of the big pieces, all of the outside of this thing, the volume is cut. It's sized, and it's right, if I don't miscut any of it. And so now I've got to sort of dive into the rest of this cut list and worry about all the blocking and the drawer guides and the front rails and the top frames and the front frames and all of the smaller pieces, and there's going to be a lot of them that have to be cut and cataloged and sized before I actually start milling all of the notches. Cutting's a big deal. Getting the yield out of the boards is a big deal, and I feel like I'm down to the point now where I can't mess it up too badly. Well, just the first part of the blocking and the miscellaneous backing inside of this thing is almost 100 lineal feet of 3/4 by 3/4 and 3/4 by 1.5 inches, and it gives me a chance to burn up some of the stuff that I cut away and threw away. I probably ought to go out to the burn pile and pull some of that back, but at some point it's just not worth milling and manufacturing a piece that's less than what? I don't know, 2 or 3 feet long. It's all right. It's a good day. It's fun to run a saw like this, and we'll just put our head down and make some strips. Well, I get to break down 2 more big boards, and the first is for lines 22 through 25, 2 by 1.5 inches, and then the same thing happens down here with lines 34 through 36. The decision I've had to make, and Kenny helped me with, is this board is sized to 2 inches thick. It's 2 inches thick. But to get 2 by 1.5 inches out of that, I'm either going to have to size down to a little under 2 inch to finish, or rip it the other way. So I'm going to rip it the other way. So this is the board. It's a beautiful board, and it's a hard, tough wood fiber. You've seen me using this for breaking down some of these 1-inch boards, and it works okay. But I'm not even going to try it across here because, frankly, as convenient as it is, it doesn't have the power for cross-cutting oak. but this bad boy does, and it's one of those cases where getting out of cord is a small cost compared to having all the power you need and not having to worry about the binding or the kickback or the battery just crapping out when you're plugged into 120 volts straight out of the wall. So let me just show you. I'm going to take a 1/4 of an inch off of here. I can afford it. This has 3 lights on the battery charge. Let's see what it does. Well, it got through it, but if the weight of the board would have been falling off the end, it would have been even harder. If I haven't said it lately, I'm going to say it right now. I love this saw stop. It has exceeded every single expectation. And yes, they gave it to me. I'll own that. But man, if you can afford a saw stop, you ought to have one. I think I mentioned a little while ago that I picked up this Grizzly 16-inch bandsaw. The price was right. It came from the same fellow that I bought the planer and the cap from, as it turned out. George made me some good deals on these things, and I appreciate it. This was missing a few pieces. It needed a little bit of sanding. This little dowel that keeps the cast table in a plane was missing, and there were 2 little adjusting knobs under here that had either vibrated off or never been installed. So I've got it going. I've made a few cuts. Let's just see how it works, ripping some 2-inch by 7-inch down to 1 1/8 so I can plane it down to what I need for the sliding dead man on the table. I'm gonna run this in here. Let's make it 1 1/4 because I'm uncertain. Well, it's slow, but I think it's doing it. I think this is faster than planing off 3/4 of an inch. Wow. Varies from 1 3/16 to 1 1/16 to 1 1/8. So that was happening down at the bottom of the saw. Up at the top where I could see it. No, backwards. Up at the top, it was leaning out. The bottom was staying pretty good. But I can plane it. My learning curve is vertical with a bandsaw. So if you guys know a good reference, a good channel, I've got Ken Jordan. But Ken has a hard time explaining now. The stroke has made it hard for him. But he's such a help, and he will have some advice for me about, you know, feeding slower, or that blade's still sharp, tightening up the band maybe, or just understanding that that's the way this thing's going to work. Well, we're almost to the point where we can start putting pieces together. We're almost to the point where we've broken it down from the tree onto the ground and through the saw mill and to the planing mill and then to my shop, and breaking it down into this pile of parts, which are now cut and sized and planed according to the cut list on the plans, I hope. In addition to that, we have this stack of 2 3/4 inch boards that'll be put together for the top, and this pile of panels. You've seen me do all that work. But the last step is to take this pile of panels out to Hallman Woodworks. My friend Matt Hallman, you've seen him before. He's got a terrific woodworking business right here in Roseburg, Oregon, because he's got a 25-inch wide planer, and I don't. And these panels need to be planed down from the existing 3/4 to 5/8 before they're ready to actually start making a bench out of. I think you've been out here before. I know that we made a video about this place. Matt is a very sharp go-ahead guy with a lot of very sharp go-ahead tools, and they make beautiful things. Come on in. This time I brought Ken with me. So this door panel, that crotch is just bowing. The more wood you cut off the back, the more it bows out of flat. So he's thinking that this old Powermatic, this hog, is going to be the thing to do it with. gentleman can compensate for bad design. At least part of the time, right?
Good machinery.
Good machinery. Thanks, man.
Yeah, of course.
Well, that's it. I think if I just would have been doing this work without running the camera and all the other things that sort of surround me, this probably would have been, I don't know, maybe 4 days or a week of cutting this stuff out. I'm not woodworker enough to really know, and I didn't try to keep track, but that's my guess. 4 or 5 days cutting, joining, gluing, planing, sizing. Yeah, let's call it 5 days. And I'm guessing that if I was a woodworker and didn't have a camera to worry about, it would take me about 2 weeks to put this, what is it, 600 pounds of oak together, maybe? Something tells me it's going to take me a lot longer than that. But if you're still with me, congratulations, because it's a little boring watching cutting and planing and cutting and planing and that's it. So you're tougher than the average bear. And let me just tease it with this. I'm not starting this tomorrow because I'm going up to Cy Swan's place because that old boy at age 87 bought a new power hammer. He ran the guts out of his little bull power hammer that he's had for 30 years, and he's in the knife business, so he bought a big blue. I've never seen a big blue, but I'm going to help him roll that into his shop, drag it into his shop, whatever we've got to do, get it up on the same footing that the bull lived on, and get that good old man back to work making knives. I think you're going to enjoy that. In the meantime, thanks for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.